Hi, I'm Matthew Speck. I'm the viticulturalist and co-owner of Henry Appellum Winery, and we're in one of our oldest estate vineyards that we have on the property. We have about 300 acres of vineyard all located in the Sub-Appellation of the short Hills Bench. And so I'm just here today to speak about some of the things that are unique about our appellation, what we feel makes it special, makes our wine special and unique coming from this sub-appellation. First, I guess the main thing I'd say about Short Hills Bench that makes it somewhat different from the other parts of Niagara is its location on the escarpment. We're partway up the escarpment on a bench. We call it a bench, but really it's more like a plateau actually, in that we have the natural prevailing slope to the north to the Lake Ontario, which is typical of all vineyards in Niagara. What's unique here is that we also have drainage to the east and also to the south in many parts of it. And it's like this plateau sort of backed up by the escarpment on the southwestern side. And as you go to the eastern part of our appellation and our corner vineyard up against the Short Hills Park, we have drainage down into what's called the Short Hills. And it's a series of sort of soft, gentle, rolling hills and a valley running through there, which at the bottom of is the 12-Mile Creek, which is a fairly large river really running through the appellation, the eastern part of our appellation. And geologically, actually, that's where prior to the last glaciation, that's where the Niagara Falls, the river, water coming from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, that was its primary path prior to the last ice age, and then things shifted and now we have Niagara Falls. But so that provides something unique for us in that we have that prevailing drainage to the north, which is typical of all vineyards in Niagara. But with that extra valley, that plateau topography of our appellation, it gives us some unique, particularly with airflow. We have a constant kind of airflow cycling through our vineyards. It's not just that typical westerly influence. We get the influence of airflow of the lake effect coming off Lake Ontario, and we get air moving through that valley as well. And so we get these very unique breezes and airflow, which I think is probably one of the most defining features of our area. Another thing I think that's important, that defines this appellation is our distance from the lake. We're I believe the furthest away from the Lake Ontario, and so that can have some benefit. In the mid part of the growing season, our vineyards warm up very early in the day, and we hit very high heat temperatures in the middle of the day, like right now. It's extremely warm. So our growing degree accumulation tends to be very high here. We get lots of sun, lots of heat, which is great for ripening, especially varieties like Chardonnay, red wines as well, especially. That extra heat accumulation is great. Can really help lead to some really nice ripeness, ripe flavors, mature flavors in the fruit. And I think the other thing, third, and by no means the least important, arguably the most important, is the soil type. And Niagara, there's unique soils and variability of soils all throughout Niagara. That's something that's a hallmark of all of our appellations. Here, the soils are fairly consistent in terms of what you see right now, which is we're clay. We're all clay soils. You won't find any sand or gravel really here. It's in our topsoil especially. It's all clays. We're primarily a silty clays mixed with clay loam, brown clay loam soils. They're harder soils. They're not overly vigorous. They're actually devigorating soils. Which we like, keeps the plants from growing too large. Or not overly vigorous. It helps keep berry size down, which is nice. And for the type of wines that we're making, we're not looking for big production out of our vines. We really want to see the vines struggle and work to produce quality fruit. And these types of devigorating soils really lend themselves to high quality wine production. That they keep the plants a bit smaller. They keep the plants working, and we force these vines to put roots deep in the soil, which is really the critical thing you're looking for. You've got to get the vines through that heavy clay into the subsoil, get their roots down deep, And eventually then you end up with vines that are very balanced and even in the way they grow. In this vineyard we're standing in now, these vines are close to 30 years old. They're very deep rooted. We're in the middle of a drought right now. Things are very dry. The grass is all drying out, but you can see these vines are staying green. It's another feature of our soils. They're heavy clays, and they'll get really hard on top. You can see this was just seeded actually this morning with some cover crop. But you can see these soils are pretty dry and baked in the sun. But if you go down into subsoil, you don't have to go down that far and you start to see moisture. So there's some moisture there already, just a bit down there. If you scratch through the surface, topsoil a bit. But these vines, because they're so old, 30 years on, they have roots, 5, 10, 15 feet into the subsoil. And one of the benefits of these clay loam type soils is they actually have a high water holding capacity to them. And if the vines, as long as those vines have been grown in a way that you're making them put the roots deep, they access that subsoil moisture, which really never dries out. And you end up with plants that grow really evenly, whether it's dry year or a wet year. They're relying on moisture from deep in the subsoil, and the vines maintain a very balanced, even growing characteristic. And that's what we love about it. So we really love, we can get vines, mature vines on these soils. Once they're into this balanced type of growth, we can really make some special wines.